we check out the Tata Curvv EV and the long wheelbase version of the BMW 5 Series. Hello and welcome to Overdrive. I am Soini Dutt. Let me start by wishing you all a very happy Independence Day or an Independence weekend if you're celebrating a long one. Let's start the show with a very popular Tata Motors product that has been creating ripples ever since we saw it in its concept form. Now, very close on the heels of the launch of the Citroen Basalt comes the Tata Curvv EV, which, even though not in direct competition given its EV DNA, will be going up against the likes of bigger C-segment SUVs. Here's Rohit with all the details.
It's right there in the name, Curvv. But where are they? The only curvaceous elements on this car are the wheels. And let's face it, no one is reinventing those anytime soon. But speaking of reinvention, car makers are constantly reinventing the body styles to keep the excitement alive, and Tata is now joining that bandwagon. So let's set aside all my quibbles and celebrate the fact that today we are able to buy a body style that up until now cost luxury car money. Say hello then, welcome then, the new EV, which calls itself the Curvv but identifies itself as a sharp coupe crossover. Tata is going with the EV first to gauge how the market responds to this coupe crossover body style. And once the design theme is established, the petrol and the diesel counterparts will follow, which is not too far into the future. With a longer wheelbase than the Nexon, it also manages to pack in a lot more batteries into the floor. 45 to 55 kilowatt-hour batteries nestled within the floor, which also make this a long-range EV, despite not being a really long car. That boot space trumps the likes of the XEV700, even the Toyota Hyryder hybrid, because again that hybrid is eating into that boot space, right? However, with this coupe roofline, it means that anyone who is taller than 5'11" is going to have to practice their ducking skills. Now, in terms of the space, knee room, pretty decent, foot space also quite good, but because of the batteries in the floor, you sit in a bit of a knees up position and that compromises your under thigh support. What is a nice touch, however, is adjustable recline. Two-step adjustable recline, so you can find a comfortable spot if you want something upright or something more relaxed. So in terms of the contouring, in terms of the overall seating comfort, it is pretty decent. Now, if you're going to be tall, the headroom will be a bit of a compromise, but you have a panoramic sunroof, so that makes it all feel quite airy. The luxuries for the rear seat are AC vents and a fast USB-C slot, but hardly any storage in the door pockets and plasticky handles and switches. The real party actually is in the front. Both the front seats are ventilated. You also get this 10.2-inch instrumentation screen to add that tech-savvy edge. You also get a 12.3-inch infotainment screen that just looks like a home theater, minus the popcorn, of course. And the system is mated to a 9-speaker JBL audio that really creates that surround sound experience. But if you have kids or people identifying to be kids sleeping in the back, then you also have a mode that says as much, kids sleeping in the back. So what that essentially does is only plays music through the front speakers so that they can continue to have their sleep and you can continue to have your entertainment. Now, whether you make coffee in this or get a takeaway, there's no space to keep that coffee really, because there are no cup holders. Nothing here in the tunnel console. You'll probably have to keep this bit open and maybe try and plonk it in there, but it's going to spill all over. Even the door pockets have the space at an angle, so the cups are not going there, only bottles can go in there. So that is a bit of a missed opportunity. Funnily enough, the cover for the glove compartment has two indentations that look like two shallow cup holders or can holders, so maybe you can use this like a tray when you're not on the move. Visibility outside of this swooping rear windscreen isn't too bad from the inside rearview mirror. And you have a plethora of ADAS features to keep you worry-free when you're out on the road. The forward collision warning or the emergency brake assist aren't too intrusive and seem to understand our traffic situation quite well, including the fabled cows on the road, which is frequent in Rajasthan. What should have been a little more alert though is the blind spot warning system. Tata is confident about getting another 5-star safety rating with the Curvv, and the safety extends beyond just the features. In your daily use, the ADAS and the blind spot assistant that we spoke of and the 360-degree cameras are going to be your most used safety features, apart from, of course, the 4 disc brakes.
To know more about the powertrain options as well as the driving dynamics of the Curvv EV, do join us after this very short break. Stay with us, you're watching Overdrive. Welcome back, here with us on Overdrive. Now, the Curvv EV is being offered with 2 battery options and with a driving range of over 400 kilometers. Here's Rohit with all the driving details.
In terms of visibility, it's a high belt line as you can see from the outside, and then you have that swooping A-pillar, and that does rob into a bit of your cornering visibility. Especially if you're a shorter driver, you are going to feel that this part is a bit too broad and that cornering visibility is going to feel a bit compromised. Now, in terms of the driving posture, you don't necessarily get that commanding view of the road. It still feels more car-like to drive, and that's not because the car is low or anything. It is pretty tall, but it's also because how tall the dashboard elements are, and that is what makes it feel more hatchback-like or car-like to drive.
Getting a judgment of the 4 corners is easy, but the A-pillar blind spot can become unnerving in congested cities. There is a faint sound that the Curvv plays to warn other motorists. Take a listen. Because otherwise, this is a silent EV. But I didn't see anyone noticing this tune. It certainly prevents the cabin occupants from feeling disoriented though, with all that silence.
When we talk about brakes, the regenerative braking is really on point depending on the modes that you are driving in. At the same time, the physical brakes are also quite nice. You may not necessarily notice the handover points between the physical brakes and the regenerative braking, etc. But the brake pedal does need a firm push, especially when you're driving at triple-digit speeds. Irrespective of the driving modes that you are in, the steering feel is pretty heavy. It's not going to be as light as some of the other older Tata cars, or certainly not as light as the Koreans or the Japs that you have in this bracket. It does have that heavy nature to it. There is no dead at center feel or anything. I quite like the weight on it, but not everyone is going to appreciate that. Any driving enthusiast will certainly love this. Under braking, there's also a fair bit of nosedive, because you see this car is riding high. It is immediately noticeable when you see the car in action. It is a high rider of sorts because the suspension is on the squishier side. They have tried to engineer a really good ride quality with it. Why do I say they have tried to do it? Because, well, it works sometimes, it doesn't work sometimes. As long as the roads are smooth or partly undulated, it's fine. But when you get onto some really poor road surfaces, there is a lot of side-to-side movement. There's a lot of bouncy feel. You're going to get 3 driving modes with this electric powertrain. You have the Eco, the City and the Sport. Now, Eco, as you would expect, is going to dull down responses, but it also makes the regenerative braking feel a lot sharper. In the City mode, the powertrain feels like it's breathing a lot better. It feels a little bit more free, but the regenerative braking is not going to feel as sharp, which is a very good thing because you don't want that sudden deceleration, you don't want the sudden braking. It can become unnerving, and it can also take other motorists off guard, and you don't want anyone rear-ending you. Now, Sport mode. You've often heard us say that electric cars, instantaneous power, instantaneous torque, and if this is going to be your first electric car, you want to experience some of that. And Tata has ensured that you do experience that. But I think they've gone a little bit overboard with that sport mode tuning, because you see it gets into these wheel spins quite often. And I'm not talking about only while getting off the mark. It's also at part throttle. It's also sometimes when you are just giving it that roll-on acceleration to pull an overtake or pull yourself out of a curve, etc.
Speaking of range, our 90-kilometer drive included 25 kilometers of highway cruising at 100 to 120 kilometers an hour and 65 kilometers of city driving at speeds between 5 to 55 kilometers an hour depending on the flow of traffic. We depleted around 30% of charge in this distance with an average energy consumption of 166 watt-hour per kilometer, or 6 kilometers per kilowatt hour for easy calculation, which is right up there with the likes of the more expensive Hyundai Ioniq 5. A real-world range of 350 kilometers, if not better, seems easily achievable with the Curvv, and that's with the bigger battery variant. but that is a big plus.
Now the powertrain, absolutely on point. It definitely feels like an evolution of the powertrain that we've experienced with the Nexon EV. The acceleration is a lot crisper. You know there is a lot more power with this. And even in terms of the way it is using all the energy from the batteries, it definitely feels a lot more efficient.
This is a premium offering at the price at which it comes. It goes up against the likes of the Hyundai Creta, the Kia Seltos, Tata's own Nexon top-end variants, etc. But for this price point, not having enough storage spaces inside the cabin just robs that premium feel. So it's all down to whether or not you like the coupe crossover design. If you love it, everything else is sorted. The powertrain is excellent, the car is pretty good to drive, and it's a relatively long-range EV at that, making the Curvv an excellent proposition.
So while the Curvv doesn't feel like an all-new platform to me, there are still a few rough edges here and there. I still quite like the direction that Tata is headed in, or where the entire electric space for Tata is headed in. The powertrain definitely feels like an evolution. I quite like the way it is delivering power. I quite like the kind of range that it is promising, at least on paper and with the first drive that we have right now. And more than that, I also like the promise that this new attitude brings to the table, because with a coupe crossover in this price bracket, it just shows that Tata is thinking fresh. They are not just sticking to the traditional powertrains, they are not just sticking to the traditional body styles, they want to do something more. I hope they do something like a convertible. I hope they do even bigger coupe crossovers for people who like this kind of a body style. I hope that they experiment a lot more in different price brackets, in different body styles, in different powertrains, etc. And that willingness begins from here. And that's something that I like. That promise is something that I definitely like. Should you choose this over an Nexon? If you need more space, if you need something that looks sportier, absolutely yes. I mean, in terms of the features, the space, the way it looks, the way it performs, the kind of batteries it brings to the table, or even in the ICE counterparts, the kind of power that it is now promising with the GDI and all of that, I think the Curvv is definitely a worthy upgrade if you already have a Nexon or you want to think about the Curvv instead of the Nexon. Should you consider it to the other existing products in the market? Well, I think they've positioned it quite well. It's priced quite well. In terms of the features, it is definitely right up there with the Koreans. So I think even those bases are quite well covered. So it's definitely a convincing product. It's definitely been worth the wait. Now, how the market reacts to this body style is something that remains to be seen. But I won't be surprised if it becomes another big ticket product like the Punch and the Nexon.
Well, the Tata Curvv will launch on the 2nd of September, and if you have any queries regarding this car, do feel free to ask us in our comment section on our YouTube channel. We'll try to cover all of those points in our review for you. Let's take a very quick break here on the show for now, but coming up on the other side, we'll tell you all about the BMW 5 Series long wheelbase version.